Whoo, this is going to be a fun one today because the Chiefs have made their initial 53-man roster. We are live for you here on Locked On Chiefs with Matt Derrick, beat reporter Chiefs Digest, as well as Chris Clark and myself. Who made it, who didn't, the big moves, and why would you trade with the Raiders? Today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends, neighbors, Chiefs Kingdom around the world. I know you're watching today because there is a first look at the Chiefs 53. And no, I do not think it'll be the same way tomorrow, but we'll get Matt's input here pretty quickly. We appreciate you making us your first listen. Maybe you were just live on Matt's channel as well. So live, first, second, third. Check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network for your next show because we're all over the place for every team. We're brought to you today by LinkedIn Jobs. You can find all the qualified candidates that you're looking for, whether they're on your 53 or in your front office. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL today for free. Terms and conditions do apply. A lot to go over. In some places I was right, and I'm going to point it out every chance I get. In some places I was completely wrong. And oh yes, there are still some things that we could do. Matt Derrick, ChiefsDigest.com. You can check him out. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, and RGR Football. What do you got, Chris?
Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner, and lots to talk about when we sit here and look at this. And Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest is with us again today. So we are going to talk all about this roster and really, man, where do you want to start?
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
Biggest surprise so far, Matt.
Well,
we'll get to the trade later.
I'm still kind of right now. The reason why I am looking down, for those of you who are watching, I'm looking down, actually typing the roster, deleting names from the roster as I'm going through who's been waived and everything. I am right now very surprised at the fact that the Chiefs may have 4 cornerbacks on this roster. Nick Jones is on here, but has the hand injury. I mean, he's not having surgery. You can play through a hand injury. So it's possibility, but I mean, if he's going to injured reserve or he's not going to play for a period of time, Chiefs have 4 corners and 4 safeties. That's not normal and not a usual typical situation. So I am begging the question if there's more work to be done there. But I'll tell you what, the other thing is that I have the same question at defensive tackle. Even with the trade for Neil Farrell today, the Chiefs released everybody that they basically tried out at that spot behind Derrick Nottingham and Tershawn Wharton. I don't know who the defensive tackles in this rotation are, other than I don't think that they're on this team right now. I mean, there's a couple of holes here to fill on the defensive side. And I'm kind of surprised that they went this direction. Doesn't mean that some of the guys that they released won't be back. Maybe there's some things that they need to still do roster-wise, but I've got some questions on the defensive side.
They kept Dickerson, by the way, so that is another DT that I was kind of surprised about.
And dealing with a turf toe injury, so whether he's 100% and ready to play, and whether he's one of those guys that they're going to try and sneak onto injured reserve and bring somebody else back, that's a question. And maybe it is. Maybe one of the other guys will be coming back once if Dickerson needs to go on injured reserve.
And Ryan, I think they have 10 offensive linemen. That's why your numbers are off.
Okay, well, we're going to fix that because clearly I'm going to have to find a way to display it too. And it's funny that you mentioned some of these. What it tells me is that in the trade that we're going to talk about later, you've elected to go with Noddy and Turk Wharton as your starters, with a rookie in Coburn and a second-year player with 128 snaps under his belt in the regular season as your backups, along with Dickerson. This is a surprise. I don't think it's over. I think there's more coming, and I think we all know why this is happening. The big question to me, Matt, and we're going to have to get to the corner group because I agree there is a lot there to be chosen over. You neglected to go over the best thing that I did all off season. I told y'all, and you talked me out of it. They kept 2 quarterbacks. Are you as shocked as the rest of Chiefs Kingdom is that Shane Buechele is not on this 53 day one?
Including Ryan, for that matter. Just want to point that out. Ryan's shocked too.
I'm surprised. I mean, I had a 3rd quarterback on every single roster projection. And honestly, I mean, I'd heard some rumblings that maybe the Chiefs were interested in listening to some offers on Shane Buechele, and maybe he wouldn't be on the 53. But even then, I thought, you know what? If they do trade Buechele, Chris Oladokin's proven enough to me to be the number 3 and be the next guy, the developmental guy. And honestly, I think he is even, style-wise, not the talent of Patrick Mahomes, but style-wise, I think he fits that better. And, if you had to go with a Chris Oladokin as your third quarterback one day, you wouldn't have to change as much of the offense as you would have to with Buechele. It surprised me a little bit. I mean, he was still going to be the third quarterback. I don't think there was any doubt to me. Blaine Gabbert won and earned the number 2 job. But I thought there was a very good chance that they were going to keep 3. Maybe they will end up with 3 again one day. But I'll put myself in the surprise category because I had 3 on the 53 all along.
Well, don't add into Ryan's cause of trying to get Bailey Zappi in Kansas City. So just
Bailey Zappi is a free agent right this second, people.
There's no fullback on this roster, Ryan. So don't be bragging too much.
Not yet, Matt. Not yet. It's not over. That practice squad will work. And those are some things like in a Belichickian move, you could have tried to squeeze something to move Shane in a way that gets you something back. I am only half kidding. I think Bailey Zappi goes right back to the Patriots, and they're doing some roster mechanics as well. If not, certainly would love to see him in Kansas City in some way, shape, or form. But just the quarterback in being in the crunch from the defensive tackle group and this extraordinary wide receiver group, I think that all facilitated the fact that you had to do something like this and only go down to 2 quarterbacks. I agree with you that Oladokin is somebody that I think can come in and showed enough this preseason that if you're just looking to elevate backups to the point that you can move them out and then bring in the next guy and develop them, it certainly seems like this is a passing of the tide, a changing of the guard, whatever you want to call it. And I won't be surprised if that's the way they go as well, especially when you're talking about having to defend mobile quarterbacks and more of them. And you can anticipate a matchup with one Jalen Hurts eventually again. I think this is all the long game that we're seeing play out right here.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that go along with this too. I mean, that one, we have seen the Chiefs, during training camp increasingly putting a lot more edge rushers on the field and not just in 3rd and long situations. And I think that what we saw today is really indicative of the fact that the Chiefs don't know what they're doing on the defensive line, and particularly at defensive tackle without Chris Jones. They haven't been able to figure it out during training camp. So to me, that to me is one of the biggest discussions after we talked about Chris Jones, which we're going to have to talk about Chris Jones and what that means because the dude is not here. But how the Chiefs, move on without him and how they build this roster is the next big thing, because I don't think there's any doubt the Chiefs have Derrick Nnadi and Tershawn Wharton, and they have no idea who is playing behind them. And they have no idea what they're going to do. And I think that part of it is that they're going to put a bunch of different people on the field and try and figure it out.
And I don't want to take away from the defensive tackles, but I have a question on the defensive ends. Why is Minihue still on this roster? I figured he'd be on the suspension list at this point.
We're going to talk about that in the next segment.
Good question. Let
me tell you this.
Have to investigate.
Do that because the trade is coming up in the next segment. We're going to get to that. And tomorrow, folks, I'm going to put on the tinfoil hat and I'm going to run back all the crazy concepts that I have that could come to fruition. We won't have Matt for that because I don't think he can take any more of my concepts, but we will get to those later. But first, coming up next, why trade with the Raiders? What does it do? And just how dire a strait is that a signal of? And then later, was it right or was it wrong? What are the build questions that we are still concerned about right now today? But first, a message from our pals over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire feels like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain when you're bringing somebody onto your payroll, and that's got to have the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. You can get in there, write up your description, add your job, and the purple hashtag will come up framing your particular profile, letting everybody know that you're looking for the help that you need. Simple tools like screening questions, as well as any kind of feedback, give you and make it easy for you to focus on the candidates that you want with just the right skills and are going to be the fit with the experience that you're looking to prioritize and who you'd like to interview and then hire. It's small businesses that are rating LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus all their leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can post that job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Okay,
Ryan,
so go ahead.
Part of what I think actually plays into this, and it's interesting, I just wanted to mention this really quick. They did cut Deion Bush. They did cut Danny Shelton. Both of those guys could come back tomorrow if they make another move, which is another thing that I actually think plays into this trade market. Shelton is a guy that could come back and maybe give them something, and they're just looking at guys that's – the thing that doesn't make sense is you start getting in the DB room, and this would mean that Snead is going to play week 1. You have a lot of injury questions that we just don't know about right now. So that could be why they went high at offensive tackle as well. Sorry.
That is a very fair point, especially when you look at, as Matt said, 5 corners, 4 safeties, again, with the Nick Jones moving around. They have the Amenahue thing that they have to take care of with Felix and Malik and Mike Dana, along with George Karlaftis, looking like that group right there. If you take a look, and right now I should probably capture this because it is a moment in time on the Chiefs website where they list their actual depth chart as well. Some intriguing hints at what may have been happening over the last 24 hours. But what certainly did happen is 2 trades that we have to talk about. The darling of the last 72 hours has been Ihmir Smith-Marsette. He is now a Carolina Panther. Didn't get much. And I see a lot of people complaining about that the Chiefs, all they got was a swap of 7th-round picks. Well, let me tell you, they didn't have any room to maneuver, any leverage whatsoever, because every team in this league knew you ain't keeping 8 wide receivers. So, Matt, the fact that they got anything, even if it's just an upgrade in the 7th round for Smith-Marsette, I find it as takeaway a positive.
Yeah, I mean, there absolutely. I mean, you're right. There was really not a lot of leverage. I mean, to me, a conditional 7th was about the best you could hope for. And frankly, I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan and you've seen what Brett Veach and his staff has done in the 7th round, I mean, if you're potentially moving up 20 spots in the 7th round, I'm okay with that. I mean, that could end up getting you a really, really good player. Hey, it would have been great to keep Ihmir Smith-Marsette, but here's the thing. I mean, about that receiver group, and in comparison with the other groups that we've been talking about so far, in every other group, there were guys who did not perform, and that's why that they're not on this roster, or they just didn't meet the challenge, and the Chiefs decided to go a different direction. In that receiver room, Chiefs had like 10, 12 guys that did everything that they were asked. I mean, you could even say going down to like a guy like Nico Remigio, who had 0 chance to make this roster. Well, he still did everything he was asked to do. Ihmir Smith-Marsette would have made this roster in a lot of seasons.
Last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would have. I mean, there's been plenty of years I think he would have made the roster coming out. It's an interesting bell curve receiver room in that, like I said, I've been telling people, I don't know that there's an alpha in this room right now, in that there is a 1,000-yard receiver at this point in their career in that room. But I do think that there's a bunch of number 2s and 3s in this room. And that's not a problem. I mean, we'll see how they distribute the football and everything. But the fact that you're able to get anything from Ihmir Smith-Marsette, and frankly, I mean, like I said, a 7th grade upgrade for Brett Veach, look what that could get you. That could get you another Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah, we'll see what they do with Nick Jones, who's the other 7th-round pick that they just had this year. Really quick, since you mentioned him, Nico Remigio was waived injured, so he would revert to the IR, correct?
Yeah, if he clears waivers, which I would absolutely expect that he would, he will return on injured reserve, and Chiefs want to keep him or as a project, just like Justin Ross last year. They can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and they also put Jerome Carvin, and I'll let you. Fudakasi is the one that is the name. I can't pronounce the first name. Also waived injured.
Yeah, and those guys were banged up in the last game and everything, so not a big surprise there. One that kind of interesting, Cole Christensen was also hurt in that game the other day. Not serious though. He was waived, but not with an injury designation. If he clears waivers, which I think he probably will, Chiefs will sign him back to the practice squad. All indications are. So that's at least one injury situation, small one that went the Chiefs' way at least.
The other big maneuver today was that trading with a divisional rival in order to shore up or at least give yourself a chance to get a more serious depth body at the defensive tackle position. Neil Farrell, LSU guy, showed out at the Senior Bowl while I was there, and I put him on the short list for the Chiefs last season. Clearly, Brett Veach in the front office felt the same way, and when there was an opportunity, despite being inside the division, they went for it. I don't think that that's enough, just like you were talking about in the last segment there, Matt, but does it surprise you that they were even able to get this done?
A little bit. I mean, to me, it's a surprise. Well, I guess it shouldn't be a terrible surprise because the Raiders seem to just walk away from all their draft picks. They have zero confidence in their draft. But it's a little bit of surprise that, they're able to get that done. But once again, I mean, the other serious part of the surprise to me is that the Chiefs feel like a second-year player that played, I think, 9 games last year in a very limited role and had a shoulder injury that kept him out of OTAs and didn't get cleared physically until August 9th. They feel is better than most of the defensive tackles that they had in training camp this year. That's the concern for me, is that it comes back to the depth of the defensive tackle group and what they have, that they feel like that's an upgrade. If that's an upgrade, I think that's no knock against Neil Farrell, but it's an indictment of where that group is without Chris Jones. And to me, it's scary.
I would agree with that, but I would also say that this gives them control of that player for 3 years at a cheap cost. And they keep bringing in these guys that are 1 year guys for defensive tackles. So I would think that that's kind of what they're looking at is a situation where maybe Noddy isn't back in 24 because they feel like they can move on from Noddy and keep a guy that's going to be much cheaper and free up some more cap space. It's another way to go younger.
It certainly is. Now, I want to take a look at where we might have some discrepancies with where the Chiefs made decision points and what we expect to correct them. We'll do that on the backside of this. Thank you for being with us live. If you are, you know that we just took a short break. I want to give you guys a quick look without all the hubbub on top of it of where we're at right now. And both Matt and Chris will correct me if I'm wrong here, because we are sitting at 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 7 in the wide receiver room, only 3 tight ends, and a full offensive line group. We go 5-5 on the defensive line, 6 linebackers, 5 corners, Nick Jones being one of them with an asterisk, and 4 safeties. Is my math right, everyone?
That's what I have. That's what I have, yes. Okay. And that's 10 defensive linemen without Charles Omenihu, who is on suspended list. The Chiefs did not put it on their release that he's on suspended list. I guess they were just hoping that we would forget that happened. But he does not count on the 53 right now.
So doesn't that open up an extra roster spot then?
I mean, they've got all 53 filled.
Yeah. If he's on there, then they don't have to move him over. Well,
they had 50. They made 38 cuts and brought in.
They had 90 players because of Chu Godric.
Oh, okay. That's where the math was.
I forgot about that.
They had a roster exemption for Chu Godric. And he's the guy, the international pathway player, who will probably be the 17th guy on the practice squad, since they still have an exemption for him.
Yep.
So again, if you want all this information, you want the late breaking stuff as we go through the night in the next few days, you can get it on the text line at 816-357-8781. And so this is the math right now. What is a little bit of a departure, we are even at this point on the initial 53, 25 on offense, 25 on defense. And until the league gets smart and only has 1 kicking position, it's going to remain 3 specialists. So what happens next? The big question, we've talked about the quarterbacks. That's going to be an interesting one that we do expect some changes in. The other one for me is, can you get through the season, given everything that we've looked at, Matt? In talking about 13 personnel, you only have 3 tight ends on the roster right now. One of them we know is a little bit limited downfield and is more of a specific role. Is that plan now out the window? Are we expecting re-signings right now that could be game day elevations off of the practice squad?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like the most likely scenario. I mean, it really wouldn't surprise me if any of the 3 tight ends that they released today ended up back on the practice squad. I think they'll all clear. So, I mean, there's always a possibility that maybe there's a team that really needs some veteran help, and the Kendall Blanton's of interest. But I think that Matt Bushman's best fit is with the Chiefs. Isaiah Gathings, honestly, pretty surprised me. I was really impressed with what we saw from him. once he arrived in training camp. I mean, once again, I mean, I still think a developmental player, but he actually impressed me. I think he'd be worthy of a practice squad spot if they need him. But to me, Matt Bushman on the practice squad, I mean, if I do think that the Chiefs are going to play a decent amount of 13 personnel this year, probably more than they did last year. Probably most weeks they're only going to have 3 tight ends available. I mean, active. I mean, there might be some weeks that they would go 4, but usually I think that 4th tight end is only going to be somebody that they're going to, bring up if there's an injury with one of the other guys. So that to me, I mean, if you're carrying Matt Bushman and you just need him for a couple of weeks because somebody else banged up, that's what he's there for.
Well, and I'm curious with some of the other things that we see. Ryan, can you go back to the list real quick?
Sure.
6 linebackers. I don't think anybody really probably figured they're going to keep 6 linebackers. That to me makes me wonder if Leo Chanel or Jack Cochran have an injury that may end up going to IR for a couple of weeks. I know both of them left the game. Is it possible that they have some kind of injury that could lend them an IR? And then kind of the same question with the offensive line, not knowing about Nick Allegretti. I wonder if that's where you could pick up another roster spot by putting him on IR for the short term.
I mean, it's certainly possible that with the hip pointer that they're a little bit more concerned about Leo Chenal than maybe we are at this point. Maybe we should be a little bit more concerned. We'll see. I have no doubt that will be a question that will come up with Brett Veach when we get a chance to talk to him on Wednesday. So hopefully we'll get some more clarity about that. But I think the other part of it too is that Chiefs really like Cam Jones. I mean, he was impressive. They really liked him. He's a guy that if he was active right now, he'd be a 4-phase special teams player. I mean, that's what they like of him. I thought that I know they felt of him as a developmental player, so I fully expected him to be a practice squad guy. I am mildly surprised that he cracked a 53 because keeping 6 linebackers is out of character for them. I mean, especially with what I think this rotation is going to look like. And Cam Jones really never got any reps with the ones. I mean, in a way that you would say, okay, that this is a guy that you're really thinking is going to be making the team. But he did well enough with the 2s that I mean, he earned his spot. And if it is a case that they're just insurance for Leo until maybe they get a little bit more clarity on that hip situation, or it is more serious than we think. But I do think that they may have just been concerned about losing Cam Jones because he put some pretty good film on tape in the preseason.
He fits their mold too. And this is where they're going. And again, folks, I'm going to talk tinfoil hat tomorrow, conspiracy series about what some of these moves could implicate about later in the future, not necessarily this season.
And you're definitely going to want to hear it because I've already heard some of it. So just going to
I'm just glad I won't be here for the tinfoil hat conversation.
You can laugh next year when I'm right again.
I won't have to distance myself from anything.
But the reason that Cam's here is because of his athleticism, his ability to turn and run, and yet he's still fairly solid against the run. There is another linebacker out there that was released today off of a roster that isn't very far away, and Jabril Cox, a native of Kansas City, is out there on the market, fits that mold as well. If they're seriously worried, I see that as a possible athletic upgrade over Jack Cochran. Obviously doesn't have any time in the system, Matt. Could we see still a linebacker spot, or do you think they're set now?
Oh, I mean, it's not going to surprise me that Brett Veach looks at any and every position for upgrades on the waiver wire and who's released out there. I mean, that is Brett Veach. The only thing that I think is really the problem is that, you play on a Thursday night. So, you've got less time than everybody else around the league to bring somebody in and get them up to speed. Now, chances are if you do get somebody off waivers or bring them in, they're not playing. Although, honestly, I think Neil Farrell may have to play in week 1. I mean, look at the defensive tackle spot, unless there's some other moves. But yeah, I mean, I think that they are going to be a little bit more hard pressed this time around to bring in anybody that you think might be on the roster in week 1 just because of that short turnaround. I mean, still, if there's a talent out there, you're going to go for them. But remember too, I mean, the only thing that the Chiefs can really probably be in the market for are players who are vested veterans, because at 32nd on the waiver wire, nobody they want is falling to them on waivers. So
yeah, and that's
the real catch.
That's the big thing on Cox is if he goes all the way through waivers, you could put him on your practice squad and you have him there for a couple of weeks and get him ready. Wouldn't necessarily have to be a guy that plays right away. This is an interesting roster. I know we have a lot of people asking about Chris Jones. So I guess I want to touch base on that really quick.
The Chiefs Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy. Sorry.
That guy.
It's interesting because now he's on the do not report list. It means he doesn't count against the roster. And it also means that when games start, they will start getting back. Or actually, at this point, I think that it also means that his salary's off the roster, isn't it?
Correct. Right now, his salary does not count towards the salary cap once he goes on that did not report list. So even once he reports, now that he's been on the did not report list, if and when he shows up, the Chiefs will be in a pretty good spot to get at least a 1 or a 2 game roster exemption. So if he shows up, it might still be another week or 2 before he counts on the roster, and it would be another week or 2 of him not getting paid. So now we are to the point where Chris Jones is going to start losing $1.1 million a week if he doesn't show up. And I mean, and honestly, the Chiefs at this point needed him not to show up because they didn't have the salary cap room for Chris Jones to show up. Yeah. So not really necessarily doing him a favor because that's not why Chris Jones isn't here. He's not doing the Chiefs a favor, but if he's not going to sign a renegotiated contract, they absolutely needed him to go on did not report so they could get the salary cap savings.
Yeah, and we've talked about this. It doubly hurts him if they end up having to franchise him next year because he's going to lose money on the franchise tag next year with all the games he could miss. So that's something there on that one. Let's see what else. Ryan, I know you've talked about this, Matt. I don't know if you want to touch on its advice from agents that Chris is getting at this point.
I mean, we don't know what advice he's getting. I mean,
right.
We really, really don't know. I mean, we have heard a few things here and there, but I mean, honestly, outside of Brett Veach saying, hey, we like Chris Jones and we want him to be here and we want to sign him long-term and it's always been a priority for us. I mean, that's really been most of what anybody has said on the record. I mean, we haven't even had Chris's side coming out and saying exactly what they want. I mean, we only have assumptions and innuendo. And honestly, a lot of the offseason innuendo and assumptions was that Chris wanted to be the second highest paid player, the defensive player at his position. Is that true? I don't know. I mean, I feel like if that were 100% the case, this deal would already be done. The fact that it's August 29th and there's not a deal done, it tells me that these two sides are not. This is not a case of the Chiefs offering 27 and Chris wanting 30, and nobody willing to go to 28.5. I mean, this to me tells me that there are deeper differences between these two sides. This means it's more likely to me that they're years apart. The Chiefs are at 3 years and Chris is at 4. The Chiefs are at 60, 70 million and Chris is at 90 or 100 million guaranteed. I mean, this tells me it's not, 1 or 2 million a year that they're apart. They are tens of millions apart and maybe a year or 2 apart. And if that's the case, that's not something you're just going to bridge. So, I mean, that's how you end up on August 29th in this situation. And whether it's Chris's agents or not, I mean, I can only just give you what I hear, and I mean, I've had people who have told me that they think that Chris's side has just misjudged the situation, that they've misread it. And I mean, from a logic standpoint, I mean, look at the same situation that this happened with Tyreek Hill last year, and this is why I felt like that if anything were going to happen to Chris, and he was going to leave, it would have happened before the draft. Because once you get to this point in the season, your options for going anywhere and finding a deal somewhere are limited. So and this is a big if Chris and his agents wanted to get the most money possible and they weren't concerned about where it was, the time to do this was March 17th, like Tyreek did and Drew Rosenhaus. It's not August 29th. So, I mean, if that's the case, someone misjudged the situation. And I don't know that that's the case or not. But if that's the case, then, yes, somebody's made a mistake.
And I think you can contrast that with what else is going on around the league. Christian Wilkins is in a very similar situation down in Miami, and it is holdout today. He was holding in, participating, being there. Very different situation. And yes, for those of you who are asking, I do think he could be a possible free agent acquisition next year to fill part of this role. At this point, I do see the Chiefs' defensive tackle position being something akin to what we see at the wide receiver spot right now, post Tyreek, where it's not a singular player that fills the void. You can't do that with Chris Jones. It will be a rotation, I believe. One of those likely has to be a free agent acquisition that has both experience and some output, and then you hope to bring guys along. So more on that tomorrow. We'll go through whatever changes go on when we hear the waiver wire. By the time we record tomorrow, we'll try to go live for you guys as well. So make sure you're back. What else you got, Chris?
I just want to say really quick, if that is the case, I think you have to feel pretty good, though, if you're Chiefs Kingdom looking at 2024, because look at what Kansas City did in almost basically a year at the wide receiver room. They went from one of the weakest positions to one of the strongest. I'm not saying you're going to replace Chris Jones, but I think you're going to be in a good situation, and they can figure it out going forward. I honestly think that the Chiefs figured that they would get this deal done with Jones, and that's why it is where it is right now.
Yeah, I have to think so as well. And Donald, the trade with the Raiders, you're getting something that you have to have now. And as Matt said before, you don't have to necessarily be worried that a 6th-round pick for them next year is going to hurt you in any way. So,
well, they just traded away a 4th-round pick to get a 6th rounder the next year or 2 years later. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, if I'm giving up a 6th rounder for last year's 4th rounder, I mean,
yeah.
And I assume, right? I assume if the Raiders are walking away, that this guy's got some upside.
That's true too.
Untapped potential, we're going to call that. Folks, we're going to go back to it one more time. For those of you who joined us late, as we are live, and almost 1,000 of you in here, thank you for joining us. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell, especially if you don't listen to us in every other day like we are here 5 days a week. You can also catch us later. I'm going to be on RGR. Matt will be on Chiefs Digest. Chris will be back here with us tomorrow, as always. But for right now, this is what the roster looks like. There are a pair of quarterbacks only. 3 running backs, 7 wide receivers. Yes, Justin Ross made Amir Smith-Marset has been traded. 3 tight ends that do not include Matt Bushman. 10 offensive linemen, 5 defensive tackles, 5 defensive ends, 6 linebackers. That does include Cam Jones and Jack Cochran. 5 corners, including Nick Jones. A number of others have been cut, but we do expect some to come back tomorrow. And 4 safeties, just 4. Deion Bush is out there as well. He, as well as Blake Bell, Danny Shelton, have contracts that would allow them to return. So we do expect some more movement tomorrow. So tomorrow's show will not just be my tinfoil proclamations about what some of this hints at, but also what has happened from this point forward as we sign off till tomorrow. So we appreciate you.
There are some people in the comments that kind of have an idea of where you're going, though. I will say that.
I'm glad y'all are reading the tea leaves, because you got to put it together. It's a puzzle, but it's there if you want to see it. That said, Matt, any parting shots? Was this feels like a little bit more of a strange one to me than we go through most years?
It is actually. I mean, there's a few more twists and turns with this than I thought that there usually are and everything. And the Chris situation makes it a little bit more. I will say, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I am probably a little bit less, maybe confident in this defense right now than I was, yesterday, because I now sense that there's no faith whatsoever in the interior of this defensive line, that they're just going to try and rebuild it on the fly this year. Or maybe they're just going to put 4 edge rushers on the field at all the time and blitz a lot and just hope that Nick Bolton manages to stop the run game in the middle of the field. Little concerned about the cornerback situation, because like I said, I think Nick Jones might be going to IR, and if there's 4 corners and 4 safeties on this team, makes you wonder a little bit that maybe the deck secondary is not as deep. So I have some confidence questions in the defense, especially since I know how high their goals are this year. They want to be a top 10 defense, and I don't think that they're starting from the position that they want to. So we'll see what happens. But then again, you got Patrick Mahomes, so all is well.
Road is uphill. Things are happening and will continue to. I'm getting calls in the middle of this, so that's great. Chris, any last thoughts?
No, I'm still shocked about a couple of the moves, but it is what it is, and we're going to be looking at what they're going to do going forward. And I do expect that there's going to be some moves tomorrow So this is not the final roster, and there's probably going to be some moves made over the next week. I would not be shocked if they make another trade or two.
If you're looking forward to Derrick Parrish or Bailey Zappi in a Chiefs uniform, join me tomorrow when the hat goes on. Spending your time. I hope that you guys have a great night. We are going to be back with you tomorrow because we are every single day. Like, sub, and hit that bell. Thanks for spending today with us, and we'll talk to you then.